So I have interviewed Georgia about mental health and stuff like that, really, as I wanted to understand a lot more about mental health and how to represent it in an accurate way. So the first question I asked Georgia was, what type of mental health issue do you currently have or previously had? And she said anxiety and depression. Now, with the interview I had with James, he also has anxiety and depression. And I think that maybe I should ask someone else who has different mental health, just so then I have more of an idea about different mental health. But I'm glad that James and Georgia both have anxiety and depression. That sounds really strange. But mostly because I can understand it further and I can understand it really, really well as well, if that makes sense. So the second question I asked Georgia was, what do you think about your mental health issue portrayal in the media, such as films, TV shows, photos, or campaigns? And Georgia replied with, I think it's getting better, but still isn't there. It's also too glamorized and sometimes doesn't show the reality of it. And James said like a very similar answer, and I do agree with that. Because such as a video that I was talking about 13 Reasons Why, it doesn't really represent depression and stuff like that in a very accurate way. Um, but also there is some stuff out there to do with depression and stuff, but some of it doesn't really like accurately represent it. And I do completely agree with that. The third question I asked Georgia was, what do you think about the public perception relating to your mental health issue? And Georgia replied with, I think some people don't realise how bad it can get and think we're putting it on. And I do hear that a lot, actually. A lot of people say, I've seen this around secondary school, you don't really have depression, you're just sad at the moment. And it's, if you're diagnosed, from your GP or the doctor, that you have depression, then you have depression. You're not just putting it on. And I don't think, why would anyone want to put on a mental health issue? Um, and the fourth question I asked Georgia was, do you see a lot of mental health awareness campaigns, such as posters or social media? And Georgia replied with, I see a little more than I used to on social media, but still not enough. I don't see many posters at all. And this made me thinking that maybe doing social media campaign, that's a really good idea, as I think it will get shared a lot more. But maybe I should kind of consider asking marketing at Carlisle College to do posters of my photos and put it around college. And maybe I could also distribute it that way as well. So I think that would be a really interesting kind of experimentation to do. So the fifth question I asked Georgia was, do you think campaigns help people understand your particular mental health, and please explain? She says that I think so, as they get a glimpse into what it's really like for someone suffering. However, sometimes they can be romanticized and that doesn't help. Um, and I think that I've seen a lot of campaigns where kind of, the model slash the subject has their head clutched in their hands and stuff like that. And as James said in his interview, that doesn't really, depress people who have depression aren't sad all the time. That's not their 24/7. So I do think that there is like depression, particularly in my opinion, does get romanticized, as that's one of the most common mental health issues that I've researched, and with anxiety as well. Um, but I think because that's like the most common and people know the most about, you know, depression, that's why it's so romanticized, in my opinion. So the sixth question I've asked Georgia was, if there was a social media campaign with photos about creating awareness for mental health issues, especially with uncommon mental health issues such as schizophrenia, do you think it would help the public understand more about mental health? And Georgia says definitely, as it gets people thinking more about mental health. I think that's what I really want to achieve with my campaign, specifically kind of young people, older people, children, stuff like that, really, as I'm going to analyse my target audience later on in a video. Um, but I definitely think that campaigns help people kind of talk more about mental health, and I think that's really important, as it should be just as important as physical health, in my opinion. So if more people talk about it, then I feel like the more normal it can be, if you know what I mean. So the last question I asked Georgia was, if you were asked to do a social media campaign about mental health, how would you go about it? And she says, I'd make it very raw and real and unusual so that people are more likely to stop and look at it. And I think that my campaign idea, like with my photos, kind of qualifies that, as what I'm wanting is to do kind of very personal headshots, but inside the headshots, I'll do double exposure and showing them what they're really thinking about, or like what they're going through and stuff like that, such as anxiety, schizophrenia, and stuff like that, really. And I think that people would stop and look at it because it is double exposure, and double exposure is quite famous for the Taylor Swift style music video and stuff like that, really, like advertisement and stuff like that. But I think by doing photos, it will really help people to stop and look at it, really. And I think it's a really good idea if I did posters as well. I'm going to have to look into that. But I also still really want to do the social media campaign as well. So I'm going to have to come up with like different hashtags and stuff like that so that it's shared a lot more. Um, so I'm quite happy at the moment with this interview, as it's helped me get new ideas about stuff such as posters and stuff like that, and I really want to look into that. So I'm really excited more about this project, about distributing it, and stuff like that. So I'm really happy with this interview, and it's given me a lot of cool ideas.